You've been home for a couple of years now, buddy, but you're still fighting the war.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Shoulder to Shoulder, Untold Stories from a Forgotten War, a podcast from Grumpy Combat Veteran and Friends Media, where we tell stories to bridge the Civ Mill gap. I am one of the co-founders, Will Selber. Finally, my BFF, Kate K, has returned back from gallivanting across Turkey, petting cats.
Why would people go anywhere else? If you leave your hotel room door open, a cat just comes in.
That's a country.
I mean, it's a country I'm willing to get behind.
I mean, did you meet Erdogan?
You know, for some reason he didn't return my calls.
Very strange.
But luckily, the photos of him followed me everywhere.
I bet.
Might not have just been the photos.
So, listeners, we're going to do a little special edition here for Shoulder to Shoulder. We're going to talk about the election, since everybody else says, why don't we? And we're going to kind of discuss why each of us supports Vice President Kamala Harris for president. And we're going to try to hold hands and, squeeze hard as we reach the final days. I know that everybody's on pins and needles, and understandably so. It's a razor close election, and depending on which poll you're looking at, it might send you into a tizzy. So let's talk about your reasons, Kate. What I mean, you're a little bit more left of center than me, but that's okay. Nobody's perfect, and
Okay. Mr.
Okay.
Kitty.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna get punched in the face. It's season 2. We're gonna start off with a battery charge. So, Kate, what is it about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz that makes you want to pull the lever for them?
First of all, I've already pulled the lever because I am so anxious about what happens in this election that I voted before I even went to Turkey, because I thought if something happens and I get stuck there, I want my vote to really matter. And I'm finding that is the tone with a lot of people, because I talked to my mother last night, and my father is not quite mobile right now. And she was talking about, she was like, I really need to find the right way to set up, his ability to vote. And like very tongue in cheek, I was like, oh, are you sure? Because they're registered Republicans. And she was like, oh, yes, this is a vote that you would want. And so I'm finding that like a lot of people, like there's a lot of first time voters out there. There's a lot of people who are finally sort of understanding that like one vote can actually matter. And so that to me has been encouraging. When I think about the reasons like why I am choosing Harris, I hate to say that I boil it down to like this really like fundamental disparity, which is that I think that people's lives will be protected and better under her. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And then we can go through the list like one by one on the issues, talk about like healthcare, abortion, student loans, how we deal with immigrants, our Afghan friends, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But in every single category, to me, she is the lesser threat. So, and I say it that way because I understand that there are people like you in the world and people like me who can see that she is not a perfect choice. That I think is an absolute, that's a fantasy when you're dealing with politics, right?
Yes.
But to me, she is the person who offers us a better chance to succeed.
I tell my friends usually that if it had been anybody else other than a few, I probably wouldn't be voting for Harris as a conservative in the Reagan model.
Right.
I do not agree with her probably on almost every domestic policy issue.
Right.
But when it comes to foreign policy, specifically NATO and Ukraine, that is really where I draw the line. Mm-hmm. There's, depending on who you're listening to inside Trump's inner circle, and there's some really interesting people there. He goes anywhere from pulling out of NATO to, they're going to cut he's going to cut a beautiful deal. It's going to be the best deal. And if anybody remembers back to the Doha Agreement on the type of deals that Donald Trump cuts, I would say that the chances are is that he will force the Ukrainians to give up the portions that Russia already is in possession of illegally, and that for all those Ukrainians, they will be ethnically cleansed. Now you'll get, a shine from people like Eldridge Colby, who is a defense intellectual, kind of a man educated in the Ivy League schools that he hates. And he has been pushing very hard to refocus away from Europe. But when you try to pin him down on what that means, he's slippery.
Yeah.
And what that means is that he's going to force the Ukrainians to sign a surrender agreement like he did with the Afghans.
Right.
And if you thought that the Afghan retreat was bad, just wait until what happens in Ukraine. Because what happens in Ukraine will affect Poland, will affect all the rest of the other countries.
Let me ask you a question. So you're
Yeah.
talking a lot about how he makes his foreign policy decisions. And of course, you and I are very familiar with the Doha Agreement and how that came about. What do you think that specific example says about his foreign policy making that people should be worried about if they vote for him?
I think it says that he has no values and no principles, and that he will sell out his allies. And you see that even in domestic politics, right? I mean, anybody that bends a knee to Trump, and you've seen it from the vast majority of Republicans, he just discards you, right? Go ask Jeff Sessions what he thinks about his time as Attorney General,
Or Mike
or
Pence?
William Barr.
I would be so curious to hear about how they were able to function for 4 years until that very bitter end in January.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I know a lot of people, they don't vote on foreign policy, much to my chagrin. So, it's kind of out there, over there, and what does it really matter, and all that type of stuff. It doesn't affect me, but it does.
Yeah.
If you like all that Amazon stuff, coming to your doorstep
Yep.
within 24 hours, a Europe free, united, and democratic is incredibly important.
Mhm.
And that's not to say that the Biden Harris administration hasn't made mistakes. They have, foreign policy wise, a lot of them, and I won't bore you to death with them all. But this is a man who has repeatedly disparaged our allies in public, and who has a love affair with dictators. I mean, he says nicer things to Little Rocket Man than he does to, people in his own party or Democrats. Last night, he basically alluded to the fact that Liz Cheney should be face a firing squad.
Which is not the first time that he or somebody who represents him has made a statement like that. I think here's where my concern comes in. And first, your point about foreign policy, I very much agree with you. I think that if it's not an issue that is immediately put in front of people's faces, they do not realize just how deeply it can impact their lives. So when we look at what's happening, and depending on like what foreign policy question we're talking about, it still directly links to the life and livelihoods that Americans live, right? Whether it is the cost of oil or access to a lot of our products, or even like the support network that we have for people who come in and work the low labor jobs that a lot of Americans don't want to. So I definitely agree with you that it's something that more directly affects people, and they don't necessarily understand that. I think the thing that I keep coming back to is that Donald Trump has not tried to confuse us, in that he says very clearly what he thinks. And then it's on us to actually say, we need to listen. We need to believe that he means these things. Because a lot of times I think he's so prone to hyperbole, and he says things that seem so extreme that people can't understand that he's actually not speaking in hyperbole. Like, he is offering us a very extremist version of what America could look like over the next 4 years. And I think what's been so disheartening for me, disheartening and encouraging, it's sort of like a double-edged sword, is to see the people who supported Trump the first time and then needed to suffer some sort of like direct and extreme harm under his policies before they were able to recognize that we need to listen to what he says, right? Mm-hmm. Because he's a liar, but at the same time, he is also exceptionally candid in what he intends to do for us. So like, I think about the issue of abortion. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think about the state of Texas. Typically, a lot of the women there are voting on the more conservative side of things. Mm-hmm. And then, I see these commercials come out of women who wanted to be mothers, but their lives were at risk, where the baby was not going to survive. And they were not able to access what I consider to be within the realm of normal health care, right? Mm-hmm. When we're looking at the health of the mother. And so I think What I'm worried about is that there hasn't been enough of that wave knocking people down that they will see that it will hit them eventually. And that has been really, really sad for me.
For me as a conservative, watching people who I used to read and really look up to, it's really been disheartening. Never in my life did I ever think that I would vote for Hillary Clinton, but I did. God help me.
We love you for it.
I know. I voted for Joe Biden. God help me. And, now Kamala Harris.
Hey man, country before party. That's what I think this needs to come down to. I think that you are operating in the most ethical way.
Let's take foreign policy off the table, right?
Okay.
Because most people don't care about it. Most of my friends are Trump supporters. And when I get hit with, with many attacks, I always just go back, well, that's true. She does think that, and I don't like that. But you know what? She didn't try to conduct a coup. And so at this point in time, it's not debatable. It's just not. He tried to overturn an election. And maybe you wanted him to win.
Yeah.
But he didn't. And he sacked the capital. I was in Afghanistan when that happened. And I remember I woke up in my very nice apartment at the embassy.
Sure.
And yeah, and I turned on the television and I couldn't believe it. And then I looked down at my phone and I just had every Afghan that I knew, and I know a few, had texted me and was like, "Are you guys okay?" Now, this is the first time that it ever happened. It was usually the other way around, where I text them and I'm like, "Is your family okay?"
Yeah. We are not. We are not okay.
And Jonathan V. Last, the editor of The Bulwark, about 3 weeks after that, he wrote that Trump would be the nominee again. And I was like, come on. And here he is, because he understands that cowardice, and that if you can push people like that and you can make them, he has taken over the party. Mm-hmm. It's his party. And that's why I'm not a Republican anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm a Liz Cheney Democrat. And I will never understand that you can just lose an election. It's okay. Just lose it. I've lost a lot of things, wars, stuff like that. And you're going to get up again and you're going to be just fine. But it is this cling to power, the inability to put your principles first. Yes. And that's what conservatism, when I was raised, used to be about. And now we have hit this point where I would like people to tell me what Donald Trump stands for, other than mass deportations.
Fascism.
Yeah.
I think is a great way of looking at that. I am so startled by the number of people who look at January 6th like it was something to celebrate. And it genuinely frightens me for a lot of reasons. One is that they're not taking it for the message that it was clearly meant to be, which is exactly what you're saying. He will cling to power above all else. And when you have somebody in power who doesn't know how to compromise, you can see that even at a micro level, right? Look at your relationships with other people. Look at how you deal with your boss at work. If you don't have an ability to find that middle ground, you'll never succeed. And, that's something that I put as a priority in my legal work is I never go into a negotiation with the expectation that I'm going to win it all. And that has helped me to find far better negotiating deals than I think a lot of my peers, because I go into it understanding this is what they really want, and this is how we can get them there. And this is what I'm comfortable with. These are things that you need to consider. And I think too, just the images, the amount of harm that came out of that day that people are willing to disregard. It genuinely, as somebody who just cares about other people, it's so hurtful to think about the Capitol Police who were there. Yep. And who had to bring a crowd away from one of our politicians and genuinely run for his life. The person who I admit that I am biased is Jamie Raskin, because he was one of my law school professors. And I admire him very deeply. I think that man has the Constitution where his heart should be. I just think that he always has that, in his mind. And I think about how he just lost his very beloved son who had just taken his own life. And Professor Raskin is how I still think of him, talked very openly about the impact of mental health. And he was trying to move through a tragedy in as dignified and transparent and gentle a way possible. And then a few weeks later, I believe he had two of his children in the Capitol with him and is now faced with another situation where not only are the lives of his children at risk, but also him. And I think about like those very real life examples of what was the purpose? What were we hoping to do other than to incite that type of harm on people? We had to know that taking over the Capitol wasn't going to put Donald Trump back in power. I don't think that's what they genuinely cared about. I think that they wanted to cause harm to people they disagreed with. And we need to pay attention to that because he is giving permission to people to act with that type of violence. And that is what the next 4 years will be.
His supporters tried to kill Mike Pence. And you can think whatever you want to about Mike Pence. He's a little bit too socially conservative for even my taste. But, I mean, he said no and didn't do it. And, history, you get a small line in history if you get one at all. And that will be his line that he said
Yes.
no.
Yes.
And he hasn't supported him, and he doesn't support him. Let me just say that illegal immigration has been a problem for a long time. And this isn't a new thing. And as long as we become the beacon of liberty, and still are, people are going to come here. And at a certain point, you have to be a little bit proud that everybody and their mother wants to come here, and they're going to crawl and fight their way through it. And there's a bunch of compromises on the table. Senator Langford from Oklahoma had a bill that was pretty tough, and Donald Trump scuttled it. That was him. So it doesn't make sense to me. I am somebody who is of the George W. Bush cut on immigration, that we need immigrants, that they make us stronger. I love immigrants. I love refugees even more. I think that they are the best of us. If you want to get injected with a good dose of optimism and American pride, go hang out with some refugees. Seriously. They are so proud to be here, and all they want, 99.9%, all they want is to be contributing members of this great experiment that we're doing. Yeah.
It makes me think of, and I'll inject a little bit of more happiness. It makes me think of Halai.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the authors that we feature on our website a lot, it's called Hope's Corner. It's actually written by a 16-year-old Afghan girl. She is my sister, like she is my family. I love her with everything I have. And she just arrived in the United States last week. And I said, hey, what do you need to feel settled here? And she goes, no, I'm ready to go to school tomorrow. Right. So she gets to her house late afternoon. She starts school the next day. And I said to her, you can take time. It's a big thing that you just did. Like, you left your home, you've been traveling for so long, like you can take time. And she goes, no, I'm ready. I'm ready to be here. And I have been ready to start making changes. And she's going to start doing that from here. Like, that is exactly the kind of person who I think that we should be claiming and we should be supporting. Like, that is the person that we want here. And I admit that I am biased, but I think that she is representative of what the immigration and refugee population can offer us, which is something great, like an opportunity for everyone.
Yeah. I totally agree. I have quite a few Afghan refugee friends, and my number one reason for voting for Harris, and I laid it out in an article this week, is that I'm scared of that scoundrel, Scott Miller. This is a man who is a Jew like me and had a speech recently at that despicable rally that Trump had at Madison Square Garden, where he said that America is just for Americans. Now, let me tell you something. If it wasn't for America, millions of Jews would have perished in Europe. If it wasn't for America, the Jewish diaspora in the United States, which is the largest, would not be here. And to have a member of the tribe mimic that type of rhetoric is just disgusting to me. He will do mass deportations. Trump has said it. If one thing is you've been able to decipher from his diatribes of stupidity, is that he is 100%, and he's always been this way, wants to round up all the illegals and then send them back. And so for my Afghan brothers and sisters who are here under P1s, humanitarian parole, asylum, whatever it is, I am scared for them, and I have heard this type of fear from them that what happens, what will happen, and let me tell you, I don't know. And even if it's done in the most lawful manner, which it won't be, because it's mass deportations, there's going to be innocent people that get sucked into that.
And
And
it's people we know and love. Like, I
yes.
think that people discredit the fact that, like, immigrants are a very present part of the fabric of our current culture, right? Like, it's your neighbor, it's your kid's teacher, it's, the physician's assistant. Like, it's people that you're interacting with every single day. And because you don't know their status, that's why you're choosing not to support them. And I think that's what's so hard for me, is that, again, like, unless people have that very direct link to something
Mhm.
that he is threatening, they don't perceive him as a threat. I want to ask you a question,
Sure.
and it is with the understanding that you and I feel differently about the Biden administration's policies regarding Israel.
Hmm.
My question for you is, I have noticed a lot of people on the very liberal Democratic side who are now saying that they're going to withhold voting altogether because the option to them is somebody who supported Israel, which they're against, or Donald Trump.
Hmm.
I really struggle with that.
Hmm.
I really struggle with, to me, that's a one issue voter. But also, the thing that I keep coming back to is that we can't push ourselves to be better if we're not in a positions to do that. Right. And so I think the impact of a Trump administration would be lesser on you as a white man than it would even be on me as a woman.
Hmm.
But, like, I will not be able to continue doing the work that I do on behalf of veterans and mental health and refugees if my rights are being stripped away. So when you hear these people who say, for whatever reason, we're choosing not to vote because of this one thing, when
Hmm.
it is such a critical election,
Hmm.
what is your response?
My response is, look, whatever you think about Israel's war in Gaza, the conflict in Lebanon, if you are of the bent that it's gone too far, which I'm not, if you think like Trump's going to put the handcuffs on Netanyahu, I'm sorry. That's just absolutely absurd. He will probably push it to go faster because he has the attention span of a gnat.
Mhm.
And when a military has like 5 months and you have to do as much as you can, then the restrictions and maybe the targeting becomes a little bit looser. So that's what I would tell people who are disappointed in Biden Harris over Israel. I would also just say for Muslims out there who Palestine is their issue, and I get it. I have been a critic of Israel's settler issues in the West Bank for my entire life. For people who don't know that because they think that I'm just this Zionist apologist, not anything but. But what I would tell them is that if you really think that the guy who put in the Muslim ban is going to be like a friend of the Palestinians, there's no way. There's just not. Just look at who's inside of his cabinet.
Mhm.
Who will it be?
Mhm.
Mike Flynn? I'm very scared about what happens to the military. There's this whole thing that the generals will save us, and I always chuckle at that. Go ask the Afghans how the generals saved them. The General Officer Corps, for those that don't know, it's like the top 1% get that. It is incredibly difficult. Now, I was a lieutenant colonel. You swing a dead cat, you find another one. It's like a 75% promotion rate to lieutenant colonel, right? Are you breathing? Go ahead. And then to colonel, it's a little bit less, like 65, depending on the service. But to make that jump is big.
Yeah.
And what he will do, I'm convinced, is that he will select the right people, the ones that he likes. He'll fire every person inside the chairman, the leader of the Air Force, all of them, and he'll replace them with his people. For those that don't know, Mike Flynn's brother is still on active duty and is a four-star general. That should scare everyone. And this idea that the military will prevent Donald Trump from his worst excesses, no, they won't. Because the people that might say no he'll just fire them and find somebody else. And if you don't think there's some thirsty 1 and 2 star general officers who would want nothing more than to become a 4-star,
Yeah.
bruh, you don't know these people. They're the most ambitious people in the world. I
Right.
mean, like, if you want to be a general officer, first off, you got to say bye bye to your family, because you ain't gonna see them that much. Because this is not like you're gonna work 16-hour days, and once you become a general officer, then you're really a company man. And these people, the Mark Millies, the Mattises, the Kellys, all of them, and I have my own problems with them. They're gone. All of the guardrails that we once had, that will be gone. Now let's get even scarier. Who's going to run the intelligence community? Who is he going to pick for the CIA director? Who is he going to pick for the NSA director? He has repeatedly stated that he's going to turn the military on the people, the enemy within, right? The enemy within. And the generals will not save you.
Right.
They will not. Do not believe that. I don't care what Max Boot tells you, that like he knows generals. He does not know generals. He's a Washington Post columnist, and he's a very good one. But they're people. And I would just tell a little anecdote. In 2016, I was at the School of Advanced Military Studies. It's a very prestigious school. Somehow they let me in. And I was sitting there on election night with my class, and when Hillary lost. And I was just shocked that she lost. And I would say 98% of them were ecstatic. And now that percentage has grown now. Now those people, my classmates, are full bird colonels. Understand where the vast majority of combat arms officers come from. Okay, they're from the South, and they're overwhelmingly from the South and from the Midwest. And so I just would tell you that there's plenty of thirsty people who would like nothing more than to get that star or that position, and they will do anything for it.
And to your point about the intelligence community, like one of the things we know Donald Trump is really good at is sowing discord, right? And we also know that he has a very limited respect for the intelligence community and what they do. He is known for sort of putting them in the corner and taking away their capacity to do the work that they're supposed to. But, and this is not to trivialize it, but what I want people to understand is that one of the bigger contributing factors, in my opinion, to 9/11 was the inability of the various intelligence networks to collaborate, right? So we were looking at a situation, and there's so many things that went into 9/11, right? So I'm not trying to just boil it down to one thing, but one of the contributing factors is that we had an intelligence community that had absolutely no mechanism set up for information sharing or collaboration, nor were they really encouraged to. Under Trump, that's the dream for him, right? Like he wants the military to be his own personal military that he can point the finger and they will walk in whatever direction he's pointing at. Whereas to him, the intelligence community poses a threat. And so he's going to get back in there and say, I don't want you guys to be working together. This is not the vision that I have. And so it actually makes us more susceptible because he gets in there, and when all you can hear is his voice screaming over everyone else, it's impossible to make sense of the noise.
Yeah, the intelligence community is a massive bureaucracy, and you could probably cut it in half and you'd be fine. It's redundant upon redundancy. But one of the things that you can do when you do something like that is that you can use different offices for different things. And you can put loyalists. And so that's Project 25, whatever that stupid thing is.
Yep.
He wants to gut the bureaucracy. And as somebody who, as a small C conservative, like getting rid of certain portions of the federal government, that has never bothered me, but it's the ideological makeup of the man who's driving that does bother me. This isn't about making government more efficient. This is about taking out people who are going to keep you from your worst excesses. This isn't Mitt Romney. This isn't Liz Cheney or anybody else doing this. This is a man who, has said really awful things about the military. Losers and suckers, dodged the draft in Vietnam, who said, his dating scene was his own personal Vietnam, which I don't doubt. I don't know what he was doing, but it doesn't seem like he's made a lot of smart choices in his life. So at this point, John Kelly's comments have kind of fallen on deaf ear. I really hope that Kamala wins, but even if she does, we're not out of the woods yet. And the only way that this manifestation, this Pat Buchanan on steroids, is defeated is unfortunately sustained electoral defeats.
Yes.
And unfortunately for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they have to be perfect. And Trump has a different measuring stick. Mm-hmm. And I've seen this before, and this is an analogy that I've been toying with. Now, Donald Trump is not the Taliban. The Taliban is a different entity, all that type of stuff. Okay. Throat clearing all the way. However, there's a parallel here that I've seen, right? When I would be out in the hinterlands in Afghanistan and I would talk to some Pashtuns, one of the things that I would run up against is this disparity of expectations. I would be like, I know you're upset, and understandably so. We had an errant airstrike, and these are the things that we can try to do about it, or whatever we'd done wrong. And I would always try to tell them the Taliban are going to come in here and murder, rape. This is what they've done. Mm-hmm. And the standard answer that I would get is like, yeah, but they're the Taliban. I expect that from them. And that you see this kind of parallel here. People are just like, it's baked in. I hear that a lot. It's like, well, he's just like that. The Harris administration or the Harris campaign can have a gaffe, a small one here and there. She's a human being, not a deity. It's basically the end of man. I mean, it's apostrophe gay, which has recently happened, or she mispronounces something, or Tim waltzes out and says something kind of silly. God bless that guy.
I love him.
Yeah, he's an interesting fellow. Not my cup of tea, but he's a good man and served honorably for his country.
Which, thank you for saying, by the way.
Yeah. At this point in time, my anger is really at the Republicans because those sons of bitches have kept me from voting against this administration.
I think
and as somebody, yeah, it's just all I wanted to do was vote against the Biden-Harris administration. I just was like, hey, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, whatever. Just pick one of these people and throw them forward, and that's good enough for me. And the Republican Party had a chance this primary season to make a different choice, and they didn't. And that's on them. And I am disheartened by the whole thing, and I don't know. I'm very fearful of what happens next. People say that I'm overly dramatic, but I would just tell you that I know that you should listen when people tell you who they are. Just listen to them.
That's what it comes down to. And I mean, he hasn't hidden it, right? Like he put it in writing with Project 2025, or when he goes out there. I think the thing that really left me feeling frightened, the most recent example, was when he said he's going to protect women whether we want him to or not. And
is that not the right thing to say?
We don't love when people threaten to remove our autonomy. It doesn't feel great. And it's something that a lot of people can't relate to. But I had lunch with a friend of mine recently who has known me for a very long time, and has sort of seen my development, because I grew up with a conservative family and I didn't even identify my values as conservative until I sort of branched out and started making friends with different communities who were willing to talk to me about things. And he said, not so directly, but I think the implication was what he thinks is wrong with me, which, baby, there's a list. But for him, it was that I always came from this fundamental belief that people have an inherent value and that it is our job to protect that. When I went to law school, I was considering going into human rights as opposed to national security. And it was because of exactly what he said. I believed that there were these fundamental rights that we are not supposed to detract or take away from people, but it is our social obligation to provide. And he said, I don't think that most people feel that way. And for years, I couldn't relate to that because it was such a reasonable, rational, empathetic thing, is that I look at you as somebody who has different ideals from me, but I still want to protect your value. I want to protect your right to exist. So if I saw somebody who came in and said to you, here are all the ways in which I'm going to harm you, I would feel that it was my moral, ethical imperative to get involved. And so my friend was essentially coming from the point of, that's why you couldn't, I really didn't think that Trump would win the first time, because it was so astonishing to me that there are people in the world, even people who I love, like I have family members who vote for Trump. And I don't know how to rectify the fact that I know them to be people who can care about others, but they will still vote for Donald Trump. And it is because I have this expectation still to this day that people will do what is right by each other. And I know, obviously, especially over the past 3 years, I'm seeing that that is not the case. But is that really what you want to admit? Is that you're the kind of person who doesn't care about other people? Because that's what it comes down to for me.
Kamala Harris has run a very good campaign as somebody who is not a fan of her policy proposals. But just, I'm very impressed by the hand that she was dealt. She was dealt a horrible hand by President Biden, who should have gotten out of the election a long time ago.
Yes.
I mean, imagine being put in that position where you're basically stepping into somebody who has obviously shown a decline and having to basically blunt that criticism, put together, reassemble the coalition, and which she did very quickly, and then start up a campaign within 2 months. She mopped the floor with him at the debate. I haven't seen an ass kicking like that since a couple of firefights in Afghanistan.
Beautiful.
It was beautiful. Oh, I mean, it was like the tale of two debates, right? I mean, the other one, you were like, oh God, what is happening? As soon as Biden shuffled on that stage, I was like, "This is it. This is going to be a disaster," and it was.
Dementia in action, baby.
Oh God, I was like, "No." As JVL said, the sum of all fears. Absolutely true. But I think she's not the best on taking questions at times. But neither is Donald Trump. Please go listen to some of the answers that he gives
Yeah.
to questions, and it's just like kind of meandering thing. But I want people to realize that she has spent the last month courting people like me. She has. I mean, look at some of the things that she's gone out and said. She's come out and said that she has a Glock. She's come out in favor of, tax cuts. She is more of a free trade capitalist than Donald Trump is, who is a protectionist. And she's repeatedly said, and she said it last night, that she wants to have differing opinions at the table. Yes. She has Liz Cheney. My God, Dick Cheney, Darth Vader himself, my BFF, came out and said that he's voting for Harris. It doesn't get much more conservative than Dick Cheney people. And
I mean, and you're seeing like the Bush daughters are going door to door right now. Like I think what we are seeing is that, and I regret that they're doing it so late, to be perfectly honest. Like I regret that some of these comments are coming out now because I think that she really could have benefited from them earlier. But I think that we should pay attention when the people who we admire and respect and who have a track record of trying to put their country first, whether or not you agree with the ways in which they did it or the policies, like these are people who were genuine politicians. And if they are coming out and trying to direct you, pay attention. But I think, again, it goes back to that question of, I don't know that this is really about politics.
It's not.
I think and so we're trying to inject a lot of like rationality into the reasons why people would vote for him. And I think it just comes down to he supports the shitty things that they want to do.
There's always a market for telling people that their self-righteous indignation is justified. I would just tell you that, like, look, as somebody who has been a vocal, and that's putting mildly, the Biden administration, specifically on Afghanistan, who is pro-life, who is pro-Second Amendment, it's not a hard choice for me because of January 6th, because of what he's said about immigrants, because of his bromance with Vladimir Putin and Little Rocket Man. That is not the type of man that I want, again, leading our military. And if you think he's going to restrain himself after the Supreme Court gave him basically carte blanche with the presidential immunity. Hey, look, man, strap yourself in. It's like I tell people, like, are you worried? I mean, I'm worried for you because, Will Selber is 100% permanently and totally disabled, so they're not taking me away.
That's a sick flex, man.
I know it's a sick flex, but like I'm well armed, right? And I'm in Texas. I like to hide amongst them, right?
I'm coming over.
Yeah, and so like For everybody else, for my our conservative listeners who are Trump supporters, this is an attack on you. It's an attack on the person that you are supporting. And I hope that one day we can return to a place where we don't hate each other just because of the people that we pick. But I would just tell you, what does conservatism mean? Because there's two traditions, right? There's the American tradition that Reagan brought in, and then there is the European tradition of blood and soil, right? This blood and soil conservatism that scoundrel, that anti-Semite Tucker Carlson represents, who brought on a Holocaust denier onto his show. This is a man who, has a huge influence on Trump. And yesterday he said that he was attacked by a demon.
Be his own mind. We can't speak to that.
This is no longer racist dog whistles. It's just plain old racism. The things that these people are saying, calling Tucker Carlson, calling Kamala Malaysian, Samoan, whatever, that's just despicable, man. It's so saddening as a conservative, as somebody who admired, still does, John McCain and Mitt Romney, and to see what has happened to this party that my father was a supporter of. And for all of George W. Bush's many, many, many mistakes, and we could spend a whole podcast on them, he was a good and decent man. And he was a man who, right after 9/11, said that Islam was a religion of peace, a man who saved Africa from the AIDS epidemic. We are so far past compassionate conservatism and into this place where I am just deathly afraid for my country.
But again, like, I think that's why this isn't about politics at all.
Yeah.
I think it's about having the permission to do the things that you want to do. But here's the other thing that people need to consider is that Trump has no loyalty to anybody but himself. And so, like, these policies that you think he's going to implement because they help you, he'll turn his back on them immediately if it doesn't serve his interests. And that is something that people, I think, are a little bit too willing to disregard. I don't think we can take this person at his word. Whereas I agree with you. I think that Harris and Walz, there's no such thing as a perfect politician, right? But they want people at the table who disagree with them. And they have consistently shown that, I think, by being brave enough, and I think it is brave, to wade into the different communities that don't support them and trying to give them an opportunity to ask the questions that they want to ask. And that's the person who you need leading the country. And I agree with you. Like, I think that for all of the problems that I had with W, I think that he acted in a way where he always thought he was representing the best interests of his people.
Yep.
And that matters.
I want to kind of wrap this up, and we can I just want to make an appeal to some of our listeners who are on the fence, maybe who are like me, who like some of Trump's policies. Maybe you like the regulatory cutbacks, you like the tax cuts, you like the Abraham Accords. And all
He's
that
done some good things for veterans.
I got it. Preach. I would say this. Harris is going to be able to do minimal damage to the conservative cause. She's going to be up against a 6-3 Supreme Court who's going to check her repeatedly. The Senate's going to be Republican, almost certainly. So all of this stuff that you think she's going to do, and at the best, she'll have maybe a couple seat majority in the House, she won't be able to do. Mm-hmm. She just won't be able to do it. Mm-hmm. At most, she'll expand the government, which Trump did too. So, look, she'll put some judges in the federal judiciary that you won't like. But I just want people to understand this. If you want a new or a better version of conservatism, which I want more than anything in the whole world, you have to do what John McCain did and stood for his entire life, which is put the country before the party. Yes. And then if we defeat Trump this time, we get back into the party and we have a bloody civil war, and we try to take it back from him. And it's going to be a long, hard fight, and we might not win, but we will lose. We will lose what we cherish the most if he wins. I'm convinced of it. I'll let you have the final word, KK.
I'm banking so much on the word of Alan Lichtman, the professor from American University who's known for predicting things, because he predicted Harris. And that is the little bit of hope I am clinging on to. But when you talk to the Trump supporters and their first instinct is to attack Harris and Walz, My question to you is, how is Trump going to address that better? How is he going to correct what you think is such a big issue? How is he actually going to make life better for you? And I think if people were really to dig into the things that he has been saying and what he's representing, like Project 2025 is right out there. It's a heavy read, but read it, because put it into Chat GPT and ask it to summarize it, because that is a step-by-step plan for how he intends to revoke almost every population's rights, whether it is the women or the immigrants or minorities, or like every population is going to be deeply affected by this. And so just I'm asking people to educate yourselves and to listen to what he's saying. That's it.
When people tell you who they are,
listen.
believe them.
Yeah.
100%.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Whoever you vote for, get out to vote. Do your constitutional job to go out there and represent your country. Treat people with respect. Treat them with grace. Whoever wins, don't act like a jerk and like dunk on each other and like just rub it in each other's faces. Let the process play out. The reason why we have the elections that we do is you don't want every state voting the same way, because that's the easiest way to manipulate it. So some will come in fast, some will come in slow. And if anybody decides that they've won the election before all the votes count, that should be the biggest tell to you in the whole world. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for this special edition. As always, we appreciate your support. Go ahead and give us 5 stars. Write something nice about us. Send it to your friends. Send it to your enemies. You have that one person that you really want to piss off and you think I'll do it. You go right ahead and send it to them. I'm good at making people mad. It's one of the things I do.
It's so true.
It's so true. All right, everybody. Until next time.